It can't be that much. Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. And if you haven't listened to us before, where have you been? Under a rock? I'm just kidding. We're not that big, but we're getting there. Now, this is a cool episode. We're going to talk about this week. We often talk about kind of tips and tricks, some of the stuff that we've learned over the years between Jesse and myself, and a lot of stuff that we learned from some awesome guests. Now, today, we don't have a guest. Instead, we have reached out to our followers, our supporters, and requested them to ask us some questions. And then we're going to answer those. It's our famous AOA Q&A. Number something, I don't know. It's the 6th or 7th one now we're doing. But these are always a blast. I know Jesse and I always enjoy them, right, Jesse?
They're the best. Just because we like to rant. So bring on the rants.
Unscripted ranting.
Now, something that is more scripted is our interesting fishing fact, which Jesse has prepared for us this week. And as usual, I have no idea what it is, but Jesse hinted and told me he's going to school me. So my prediction is it's going to be about schooling fish like herring or like bass down in the States. How far off am I, Jesse?
A little bit off.
I knew it.
But this one is going to be kind of fun because I thought we could talk about something that every single angler, I guarantee, has cursed, has ranted about, has complained about, has probably almost died from. And what is that thing, Andrew? I'll give you 2 guesses.
Jet skiers.
That's fair because they are similar, but no.
large wakes and stuff like that?
Nope. We're going to talk about one of the world's deadliest animals.
Mosquitoes.
Yes. Mosquitoes. Yeah. Mosquitoes are annoying. I hate them so much. I know they have a purpose for some reason, not sure what, but that purpose is to annoy me. But anyway, I have some interesting fishing facts about mosquitoes, which again are terrible. But these are some pretty interesting facts. You might know some of these, but you probably didn't know all of them. Because when I was doing this, I actually got some information from about 5 different websites, including a bunch of government websites as well, from all around North America. And a lot of these are very interesting. So listen up. A mosquito's wings beat 300 to 600 times per second.
Per second?
Per second. That's why they make that annoying, like, because their wings are just flopping.
It can't be that much.
It's a lot. So
wow.
How fast is that compared to a hummingbird? Faster or slower?
Way faster.
Apparently, mosquitoes' wings beat from 300 to 600 times per second, and a hummingbird is 80. That's crazy. So, like, we've had a few opportunities to see hummingbirds pretty close. I was at my aunt's cottage a few years ago, and they have a hummingbird feeder right in front of their window, and you'll see them come in, and they're so loud. Of course, the wings are a lot larger. But that's crazy. But now every time you see or hear those stupid mosquitoes when you're in the tent, or you hear them and they're just like around your ears, like, and that's annoying noise, you know that their wings are beating so fast it's not even possible. It's crazy. Now, here's an interesting fact. Did you know that male mosquitoes find female mosquitoes by listening to the sound of their wings beating? The males can actually identify the correct species. There are 3,000 species of mosquitoes. So they can identify the exact species by the pitch of their female's wings. Wouldn't that be interesting if that's how humans founded mates? You're looking, all you do is you listen, and we're not listening for wings because humans don't have wings, but you hear them walking.
Listen for some high heels clicking across the floor.
Hey, that's exactly the woman I want. Thank goodness we're not mosquitoes. So an adult mosquito can consume about 5 millionths of a liter of blood in a single meal. Now, it sounds like nothing. 5 millionths of a liter of blood. That's like, what, half of a drop? Not even? Well, to compare that, if you're wondering, studies have revealed that mosquitoes are able to drink 3 times their own body weight in blood. So imagine, Andrew, if you had to drink 3 times your body weight in some kind of liquid, how much would that be?
That's 600 pounds of... well, more than that. More than 600 pounds of whatever.
Isn't that crazy? All right. Here's another cool fact. Mosquitoes can fly at 1.6 to 2.4 kilometers per hour. So if you can walk at any speed, you should be able to outwalk a mosquito. So if you're getting eaten alive, just walk away. Now, unfortunately, they're coming from all angles.
Right into another cloud.
So you're going to walk into more mosquitoes, but that's okay. Now, you may have wondered, how do mosquitoes find me? Every single time I'm out, the mosquitoes just find me and I don't know how. Well, this is how they find you. A mosquito can smell carbon dioxide you exhale for up to 80 feet away. Carbon dioxide it's the main way that they find you, and they find other things that they might want to eat. They're not only, attacking humans here. They also attack other things. But how do they do that? Well, they have a special organ called the maxillary pulp, and it helps them smell CO2 released from when we breathe. So we may think, oh, I'm going to run away from the mosquitoes because they can't chase me because they're slow. Unfortunately, when you're running, the CO2 increases, and then they'll be able to smell you from 80 feet away. Therefore, the cloud of mosquitoes that you ran away from instantly becomes larger. Basically, you're doomed no matter what. I thought this was interesting. They did a bunch of researchers did a study, and it says, in the interest of science. This is more of in the interest of a horror movie. Arctic researchers, like we know down here the mosquitoes are bad, but up there in the Arctic, in the summer, the mosquitoes are horrendously bad, like way worse than down here. The mosquitoes are different up there. They're like steroid mosquitoes. But anyway, they did this test, and I don't know who agreed to do this because this would be terrifying. They uncovered their chests, arms, and legs, and then they counted how many mosquito bites each person got per minute. Now, how terrifying is this? In 1 minute, as many as 9,000 mosquito bites. 9,000 mosquito bites per minute just attacking. Like your whole body would be covered. There wouldn't be a square inch of your body just not with a mosquito on it. And it said at this rate, an unprotected human would lose half of his or her blood supply in approximately 2 hours. So tip, if you're in the Arctic and you happen to be nude, no questions, no judgment, people, but if you are nude and you're running away from this cloud of mosquitoes and you're getting all these mosquitoes on you, you will die in 2 hours because they will suck half the blood out of you. Terrifying.
All I can think of now is that has to be the next more extreme version of like Naked and Afraid.
Yes.
Where they're in like really like northern, like North Territories of Canada, and they have like during peak mosquito season.
Terrible.
They're like, you get 0 bug spray.
Now, you may ask me, Jesse, why would I be naked in the wilderness? Well, this next fact will tell you maybe why. Multiple studies have demonstrated that beer consumption can make humans more attractive to mosquitoes. One small study of 43 volunteers funded by the French National Research Agency showed that mosquitoes landed on people significantly more after they drank beer. So that's some food for thought. So whenever you're on the campfire...
I wonder if that's the carbonation in the beer would be like on your breath more.
I don't know. Whatever it is, those mosquitoes, they love it. So if you're literally drinking tons of beer, just expect to get more mosquito bites. Now, there are a lot of other mosquito bite information, but I'm going to save that for Mosquito Facts Part 2. Isn't that interesting? Now I'm terrified of, randomly losing my clothes in the Arctic and getting literally killed by mosquitoes. Like you always think, I'll get malaria from a mosquito. Yeah, that probably will happen. But what if I lose my clothes? I happen to be fishing in the wilderness.
Before you go any further, Jesse, I want to give a bit of background on something. When Jesse and I used to work together spraying like rust protection on cars, we used to have this thing called worst case scenario. And we would randomly talk about like, what would be the worst case scenario of this car that drops off the hoist and impales me, blah, 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 all these different things of ridiculous scenarios. So what you're going to experience right now is Jesse and I creating a worst case scenario that has to involve mosquitoes in the Arctic. I'm going to start us off by, you're up there, you didn't bring any water with you on the boat that you're fishing in, and so you're just getting very dehydrated and your head's not making any clear decisions. So you take off all your clothes and it starts to rain to get a bit cold. So then you have hypothermia and you like are taking off even more clothes. Meanwhile, there's Jesse staring at me blindly because I'm getting naked and he's like, I brought water. What are you doing? But little does he know, I'm driving the boat so that when I'm making all these poor decisions and all these mosquitoes have bit my face and I now can't see because my eyes are swollen shut, I run us straight into a walrus like mound. There's a bunch of walruses who start like gaffing into Jesse. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we used to do for fun. Just make up stories like that. So that was good. I do like that, Jesse. I like learning more and more about things, especially kind of like native animals and stuff that we encounter. We talk and we do a lot of research on fishing things, but it's cool. I have a lot of desire to learn more about other parts of the natural world, just animals in general, or the trees and plants and that stuff. So anything that is fishing related, in the sense that I deal with mosquitoes every single time I go fishing, pretty much, that's definitely related, and I like information like that. So good job. I give you a solid A. That was good.
Nice.
I look forward to hearing more mosquito facts. Maybe later Jess is going to tell us how to make mosquito burgers like they do on like the shores of Victoria Lake in Africa. Tasty.
No thanks.
So as we had mentioned in the beginning of the outset of the podcast here, we have some awesome questions that we're going to answer. Now, these may not be, I can't guarantee there's going to be truthful answers. I can guarantee they're going to be opinionated answers from both Jesse and myself.
So these are actually some pretty good questions. I know every time we do AOA Q&A, oftentimes a lot of the questions are the same. Everyone's like, what's your personal best bass? Just like we've talked about this before. We're going to try to go into some of the other questions. Maybe we'll rant a little bit about them, but some of these are actually really good thoughtful, thought out questions. So here's a good question from Rob. He says, growing up, who got you into fishing, and can you tell us a specific moment from that time?
Why don't you start, Jesse?
I never really got into fishing. I was kind of just immersed into it from a young age. My dad started taking me fishing as soon as I could walk. I remember going fishing 4 years old, 5 years old. I have pictures of me and my dad trout fishing down the creek. My dad was a trout guy, so he would drag me out there as soon as I could walk. I was the first son. He liked fishing with his little guy, I guess. I really liked that. I used to fish with my grandpa too. And we did it every year. We used to fish. I remember a few good memories of fishing for sunfish off the dock, like most people, right? I got really into fishing, I'd say, when I was about 12, 13. That's when I became really obsessed with it. Started buying, a bunch of lures, reading all the magazines. We didn't have YouTube back then, but it was, fishing magazines, going to the fishing store, saving up my allowance, getting stuff like that. Those were good memories, just getting into it. But I think the first memories that I'd say got me into it the most was going trout fishing with my dad, and him just, hunching down beside me and being like, this is where you want your lure your bait to drift, watch your line, all that, all the things. We weren't bobber fishing. We were learning about current and stuff and where fish hold in a river system at, 8, 9 years old. And I found it fascinating. I loved it. It was kind of like a hike, an adventure. We caught some fish. Eventually we started, targeting bigger fish and steelhead and salmon and all that stuff. And it snowballed after that. And yeah, for me, like I was fortunate enough to have a parent or a family that was into fishing already. So it was easy for me. And I just, snowballed after that. But I do think for a lot of people that we get a lot of messages on the podcast or on Instagram, and they're people that are, in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s even, and they're just getting into fishing now. That's fantastic. There's so many good resources now to get into it that you can be successful. But if you were lucky enough to have someone that got you in at such a young age, it's such a privilege, I would say. So that's for me. What about you?
From a very young age, usually the trip that we would go on every summer would be either going interior camping at Algonquin Park or going up to the family cottage for a week in the summer. So it was both. We're on the water and we're fishing. When I'm up there and there's water nearby, I was always fishing. If I was too young to be trusted with hooks, I'd just be swishing a stick down by the river and pretending I was fishing, like, catching frogs and whatnot. So I was always, when given the opportunity, I loved fishing from a very young age. But I would have to say it wasn't until I was about 11 or 12, and another story that I won't get into, but Jesse's parents forced him to come up and visit us, me and my brother. We did not get along really. We knew each other, but we weren't like, I wouldn't consider us friends.
No. I thought Andrew was very annoying. I still do.
Yeah. And I thought Jesse was kind of like rude and
I still am
prideful, which he is. But at that time, Jesse was kind of really getting into fishing himself. He had already had that passion for it starting at that time. And because we lived up close to Lake Simcoe, we would either go ice fishing or we'd just walk down, ride our bikes down to the lake, and we would fish from shore. So learning that Jesse liked fishing, that kind of sparked the friendship between us. And his passion definitely rubbed off on me. So ever since then, I would start bugging my dad. So besides just going fishing when there was opportunities to do so, I was pestering my dad to make opportunities. Like, hey, let's go to some local lakes. Let's go out in the boat instead of just, going for a boat ride. Like, let's go fishing. Let's go fishing. And I was trying to make as many opportunities as possible ever since then. So, but yeah, like growing up, it was always something that we did when we were on pretty much vacation. We went fishing. So again, fishing with my grandpa, some of my fondest memories up there. And for a few years earlier on in our friendship, we were able to bring Jesse with us to that family cottage. And so even he has memories of fishing with my grandpa too. There's some pretty good stories that come out of that.
Yeah,
so.
Heck of a guy. We should do one of these days. We should do a story time about Andrew's grandpa fishing stories. He's was quite a beast of an angler.
Yep.
Yeah. So
old school. That's just think old school. That was him.
Yep. Super old school, like old. All right. Here's a good question from Rumblefish Adventures. He says, if you were a lure, what lure would you be?
My first thought was stick bait because I just sit there and do nothing. Just kind of like wiggle in place, I'd probably say like a jitterbug, something that has like some good topwater action, something where it's exciting, but also you don't have to work very hard to give it that action.
That's a good one. I would say a chatterbait. I like getting reactions out of people, either good or bad. I'm oftentimes very chatty. If you get me started on fishing, I can talk your leg off. So chatty Kathy right here. That's a good question. Here's a good question from some guy. He said, share your best catch ever. It doesn't have to be the biggest, just one that you brag about. That's a good question.
That is a very good question.
Because we've been fishing for, I don't know how old now, but I guess decades. So we've had a lot of catches over the years. And sometimes, it's not about the size of the fish. Sometimes it's about, either reaching a goal, a personal accomplishment, or just how you caught a particular fish that makes it even more interesting. Like some of my biggest, like my PBs were just like nothing special.
Hooked in the net.
Hooked in the net. And some of the smaller fish, it's like, holy smokes. I'll tell you, for me, this actually is a PB story, but it's a long time ago. I was 15 years old. We went fishing at where we used to go camping growing up as a family. And it was a terrible week for fishing. It was absolutely terrible. And I was young, maybe 14, 15. And I was looking forward to this camping trip all summer. We finally got there. It was terrible cold front. Just fish was terrible. I didn't have a canoe at the time. So I was kind of just fishing from shore. Didn't catch anything except sunfish and perch all week. And then my brother, who doesn't fish, was standing on the dock. He picked up one of my fishing rods, chucked a jig, just yo-yoed it off the side of the dock and caught like a 2-pound bass. And I was so mad. I was like, this guy doesn't even fish and he caught a 2-pound bass on my fishing rod. I was so mad. So anyway, he threw the fish back. Later that night, I went out and I fished at night at 11 p.m. I waded up to my chest, almost up to my head. I waded way out past, almost into the weeds, and I was casting past that. So it was really far. And I caught a fish, which I thought was a big carp or something. And it turned out to be a 6.5-pound largemouth. This was I was 15. So it was, over 15 years ago, but I caught this fish and I was fighting it in the dark, no moon. It was just pitch dark. And when I got it close, it was bulldogging around my leg. So I felt it swim by my leg. The line was wrapped on my leg. And I was freaking out. And I was I hate snapping turtles and stuff. So I was I hate anytime my legs are touching weeds or mud on the bottom. So I'm wading back in and this fish is just swimming around. It finally comes up. I didn't know what it was. And it came up and it just did that classic bass head shake with its huge mouth. The mouth was massive. And it turned out to be my PB, almost 6.5-pound largemouth. An absolute giant of a bass. Totally stoked. Never caught a bass that big since then, a largemouth anyway. So that for me, it was a great catch. And I was still super young. I was 15. So I was at that time, I was so stoked. I was dude, I just caught a 6-pound bass. It's absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. And I've gone back there many times. I've never caught a 6-pound bass there. That's a shame.
Yeah. I something I love kind of bragging about or talking about is when I catch things from a canoe. My biggest, not anymore, I guess my biggest muskie came out of my boat. My first muskie, 39 inches, and the next one at 40 inches. They both came out of canoe. My biggest salmon came out of my portage canoe. But I have to say, I know we told the story before, but my first steelhead I ever caught. And we nicknamed the creek Jumper Creek because it it was just a heck of a heck of a fight where I couldn't even see the fish because a huge like 4 foot around tree right in front of me on the bank, so I couldn't see as I was drifting my worm back. But I hooked into the steelhead. I had Jesse on the other side of the bank telling me when to set the hooks because he could see the fish. So I set the hook into this thing, and the creek's only maybe 10 feet wide, 15 feet wide. And there's a big shallow bay, so the steelhead is like jumping like mad. And this is a drop back. This is like early summer, and it has so much energy still. And it was jumping around like cartwheeling in the air, and then it shoots down to the bottom end of the pool, and then jumps over a tree that's like lying like a big lay down log across it and into a shallow bay, and then comes back out into the creek underneath that tree. So all I can do is, Jesse's like, that's it, you're done, you can't get that out. And so I just kind of kept pressure on it until that steelhead came back, swam back up underneath the tree, went right to the backside of that shallow bay, and then I started cranking it in and lifting the rod as high as I could to try and get it to jump, and it jumped back over top of the log and then started running down into a big log jam at the bottom, and Jesse started like splashing through the creek, preventing it from running down to the pool below. I definitely would have lost it in that thing. So eventually we landed this thing. It was fairly dark, but like I can't believe the fight that fish put up.
Oh yeah.
Being that late in the season.
Well, it was from a spring-fed creek, so
yeah, it was still cold.
Yeah, it was still cold. I don't think it was that late. I think it was like late May. It wasn't like super
I
late.
remember being like in shorts. That's all. Yeah. It was warm, like warm water or weather.
That was a good fish.
But that was,
we were howling.
My first steelhead. Like it was a ridiculous story, and the odds of getting it out of that tangle were stacked against me. So just the fact that worked out, I absolutely love it.
The fish gods were happy with Andrew that day. All right, here is a question from Raw Milk Cheese. We've answered this question a few times, but just for anyone that might be new, what's your favorite setup, rod and reel combo, and go-to bait to throw in a new multi-species lake? So I'm guessing like one combo, multi-species. Forget about the bait because the next question is about lures. So we always say this. If you're going spinning, I think spinning is a little more versatile generally. So I go with a 7 to 7.3 medium power spinning rod. If you're fishing, if you're targeting, say, pike or slightly larger fish, I'd bump that up to a medium heavy. And if you're fishing for smaller fish, or like fishing a lake that you're going to be targeting like smaller fish, like small walleye, small bass, panfish, I'd go to a medium light. But a medium can do everything. Like, what have you caught on mediums? I caught that PB largemouth on a medium, right?
Yeah.
I've caught big salmon on mediums.
I've caught salmon on mediums.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can do it. You just use the correct line on it. Again, you don't want to put like rope on it because the rod will snap. But it's so funny, just over the years working at the tackle shop, guys would come in with a broken rod and they'd be like, yeah, I don't know why it broke. I was using 50-pound line. It's like the rod is rated to 12 pound. You have 50.
And they tried to boat flip like a brown trout or something.
Yeah. The line rating is there for a reason. But yeah, you can't go wrong with a medium. And then if you're going to go with a bait caster, 7 to 7.3, again, medium heavy, fast action, 30-pound braid. Can't beat it. Those are rods that sometimes when I go like backcountry or like fishing on like a back lake where I can't bring a lot of gear, I'll literally bring those two combos. It'll be like a medium spinning and a medium heavy casting. And you can generally do almost anything with those two rods. We just bring like 6 rods that we don't have to retie all the time. We're like, oh, I want to chuck this. I already have it tied on. I just saved myself 8 seconds. How productive am I? Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Good thing I spent $10 million. All right, here is a good question. It's kind of the lure wise. Levi says, if you were to only have 5 lures for Ontario fishing, what would those be for any species?
For any species, I would say an inline spinner, just because it will catch anything. A chatterbait catches most species. A Senko, just because it works really well for both smallmouth, largemouth. I've also caught pike in them. Walleye could also be caught on them.
Yeah.
Like technically speaking, like anything could be caught on that, but it is a very good bass bait. What's that? I need 1 more, 2 more?
2 more.
Jerkbait. Jerkbait you can catch anything on. I'd have to say my last one would be, I gotta go with like a nice topwater. Because again, I love catching like pike on topwater. Probably like a big walking bait, like a 4 to 5 inch walking bait or something like a big spook.
Yeah, I'd go pretty similar. I'd probably grab, instead of the spinner, I'd probably grab a spoon, just because you can get salmon, steelhead, all kinds of fish on spoons. They cast really far. So I'd have a spoon. I'd have a jerk bait, like Andrew said, like a Rapala Husky jerk. You can troll them. You can cast them. They come in so many different sizes and colors. You can, catch pike muskie on them, or you can buy the tiny little ones and catch panfish on them. And then I agree with the stick bait or the Senko. Like they're very multi-purpose. You can catch almost anything on them. And then you definitely need a topwater. I'd probably pick, it depends where you fish, but if you're fishing on weeds, I'd pick a weedless frog.
I was debating something weedless or not.
But if not, I'd probably grab like kind of a longer popper that you can pop or walk. And then if I get one more, I'd probably pick a spinnerbait over a chatterbait just because it's slightly more versatile. But yeah, again, there's so many lures and it depends where you fish. Like some lakes are vastly different than others. If you fish a lake that's choked with lily pads, you really can't use a lot of lures. And then if you go up north and there's no weeds, it's like, oh, you can cast a lure here without snagging on weeds? Super weird.
Yeah, it fishing the Kawarthas versus fishing, like Algonquin changes whether or not I'm using treble hooks or not. Like,
yeah,
like it's that big of a difference.
Here's a good question from I Catch Stinks. He always has a good question for us. He says, what would this page be on Instagram if Jesse didn't get the Sports Pal? This page would be nothing without Jesse. Let's be serious. I invented this page.
Well, without Jesse, yeah. No, it's a Sports Pal. It would have been more pictures of us soaking wet head to toe from having flipped the portage canoe.
Yeah.
But having the aluminum boat, a lot of the stuff is now, we get to fish out of the aluminum boat too, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So
actually,
we'd still have the page. It just would have, again, it would have been a little different. It just wouldn't have featured the green canoe in half the posts.
Yeah. Actually, I was just thinking this because I follow the hashtag SportsPal on social media. I don't want to say this is 100% fact, but I'm very, very certain that my green Sports Pal, hear me out, is the most seen Sports Pal in North America. What do you think?
I think I would agree with that statement because we'll be driving along and like the odd time someone will recognize like you from your Sports Pal on top of the car.
Yeah. I'll be one time I was driving down the 401. I had the Sports Pal on the roof. Some guy was like waving at me, unrolled the window, and he's like, "Hey, Average Ontario Anglers." I have no idea who it was. It's like, okay, I get so many people like wave at me on the 401 or on the 115 going up north. When we're on the lake, so many people will come over in their boat and be like, "Hey, sick boat." We have, quite a few followers on Instagram. So I honestly think our Sports Pal is probably one of the most seen Sports Pals in North America. I don't know a lot of other, I'd say, people on social media or have that fishing shows or something like that use a Sports Pal and have pushed it as much as me. If we counted like views and stuff on all the Sports Pal posts, it would be many millions. I guarantee you that. So,
because a lot of the small craft anglers out there are using kayaks, which are great. They're awesome.
Yeah.
But for what we needed something to fish two guys.
Yeah.
So the Sports Pal was great.
Yeah, agreed.
But I guess that would be the other thing too, is if he didn't have the Sports Pal, we probably would have ended up each getting a kayak.
Yeah.
Earlier.
I still want to get a kayak, but I've actually influenced more than a few people to buy Sports Pals. So if you have bought one, you're welcome. I'm glad you like it. I don't get any kickbacks from Sports Pal. So I'm not going to call it a Sports Pal anymore. No more free advertising, guys. Sorry. If you're listening to this, we're going to just call it the Green Canoe. Anyway, good question. Here is a question from Sly Dog Sport Fishing. He says, thoughts on waders in current, safety being a concern for some. So as someone who grew up steelhead fishing, I have waders. I fish waders a lot. I fish a lot in current. Andrew does a bit too. I'd say a lot of mistakes that I see people make when you're fishing with waders is A, you're dumb.
They bend over too far.
Yeah.
And just fill up the wader.
Yeah. So that is one thing. So they do always come with the belt. And I know a lot of guys don't wear them. But if you do fall in the water, heaven forbid, especially if it's deep water, because sometimes you'll be walking along and then all of a sudden there's just like a little like hole.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, boom, you'll go under the water. If your waders fill with water in the winter, A, your hypothermia, B, you're done. You're done fishing. You're not going to just like empty them out and keep fishing. You're going to freeze to death. But you could get pulled underwater and have all that extra weight of the water just pulling you down. So make sure you wear that belt that keeps the water out if you do fall in. Some people are like, well, it keeps the water in too. It's like, how does it get in if you're wearing it though? Yeah. Also, you can unbuckle it. Anyway, wear the belt. It's safety. Another thing that I don't do as much, I do have one, but it's definitely something to consider, especially if you're over the age of 30, is getting one of those walking sticks. My buddy actually gave me one, and he's like, he was using it. You can actually like, feel ahead of you if you can't see. Sometimes the water's a little bit murky, but you can also like just have that extra support. If you hit a rock and then your foot turns sideways and you have that stick, you can like keep yourself balanced. So that's one thing. Two is don't literally walk like through heavy current. Like current is surprisingly strong, and you only realize that when you're like halfway through it and you're like, holy smokes, this is strong. It's just like you're literally like almost getting pushed right over. And say you hit a slimy rock under there, you go under, you're not wearing your belt, you fill with water, and you just drift down into the next pool dead. So don't do that.
The best thing is usually if you cross the widest crossing, unless it's like a big deep pool, that way the water is shallow, but it's not very deep, and most of that creek is wide. So that's usually where, I mean, you'll see it. You'll just see super shallow riffles that are 10 feet long, and just use the main crossings for safety.
Yeah. Don't get cocky.
But yeah, we haven't really fished like big tribs and stuff like that where it would be a high risk for us. Like we're fishing the small stuff around here. Most of the time, if you get pulled down into current or something like that, and I've fallen into holes, and you just stand back up because it's still only 4 feet deep.
Yeah, you're good. This is a good question here from Evan. He says, fall fishing or spring fishing, and why? That's a hard one. I'd have to say myself, fall. Fall's the time of year when fish are feeding up for winter. So generally they're more active. They're feeding up. They're, just trying to fatten up for the winter. And in the spring, it depends what time of spring you're talking, but in the early spring, fish are so lethargic. They're just like getting out of the winter, like funk, and they're just like, they're slow. There's a lot of really good opportunities for spring fishing, like lake trout, steelhead, stuff like that. But a lot of the other species, it's kind of a grind, I find, until the water warms up a bit. But in the fall, all the fish are like, oh, winter's coming, and they just start feeding up. Like look at muskie fishing. Muskie fishing in the fall is like the hottest time to fish. You have salmon coming in. Bass fishing in the fall is amazing, especially when they start bunching up in deep water. You can have fantastic days. There's just so many good opportunities in the fall. And I feel like generally fall is more comfortable. I feel like spring, it's oftentimes raining and it's damp and it's moist and it's just gross. But in the fall, it's just like, it's a little bit chilly, but look, the leaves are beautiful. You're just chucking the bucktail out there. I don't know.
I would have to agree that if I had to choose one, I would say fall fishing. If I had to give up one, I'd give up spring if I had to. But not that I am. But I find that like our fall fishing, the wind can oftentimes be a bit bigger of a factor. So if we're fishing at small crafts, I've had a lot more days, I think, in the fall get rescheduled or canceled due to wind conditions than in the spring. But the other thing too is accessibility. Like if I could only fish from shore, I'd want to fish spring, just because the fish are right up shallow. In the fall, they're usually dropping out of the shallows to a bit deeper water, to some of those kind of further offshore weeds. So it depends on accessibility for some. Now that I have a boat, fall all the way. I would go fall. But for those days before when I could either only fish from shore, or I had to be very careful because of the weather or water temperatures, and I had to stay very close to shore, I'd probably say spring.
Yeah. Again, there's great fishing opportunities in every season in Ontario, from winter to winter. But my favorite months to fish are September, early October. Like that time period, I absolutely love. Like what me and my wife started doing is we used to camp a lot, and then we realized that, why are we camping in the summer? I hate summer camping. It's hot. The tent is hot. The mosquitoes are everywhere, which is terrible, like we mentioned. And it's generally just not a good situation. Like the fishing, it's like during the middle of the day, it's hot. You get a heat headache. You're dehydrated. I'm like, so we went camping one time in mid-September for our week-long camping trip, and there was less bugs. It was beautiful. We didn't get to swim. It was a little chilly. But other than that, the fishing was good. The nights were cooler. It was amazing. You could nap out in a hammock and not have to worry about mosquitoes attacking you. It was great. And I was like, why don't we do this every year? So we did it this year. We booked our trip in September again. And we're even thinking about booking a trip in early October. So I do like the fall. It's a little more comfortable for me personally, but there's great, like we had a great spring ourselves, doing a lot of early season bass and trout and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
it's hard. It's hard. In Ontario, you have so many options. That's the problem. It's not like Texas where they're just fishing for bass 12 months a year. That's cool. Lame. We fish for everything. Here's a good question from Mitch. He says, have you guys ever caught a bowfin and or burbot?
I almost did, and it straightened out my jig hook.
Yeah.
Like, I was jigging for bass, pitched it right beside these bulrushes, and I thought I had like my new PB bass, and we figure now there's no way a bass pulled out that hook.
Yeah, it was
like
a bowfin.
100%. Straightened that hook.
Yeah.
I was guaranteed a bowfin.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the closest I've come, but I really want to. I really, really want to.
So I've caught both, and I'll tell you, they are probably two of the most underrated species in Ontario. Bowfin, like Andrew mentioned, they are ferocious. They make bass. Like, if you think bass fight good, a bowfin is like 5 times.
A bowfin is literally like a fin with muscle.
Yeah.
Like, the bass has one fin on the back. The bowfin is 3/4 of its body is its swimming apparatus.
Yes.
Like, it is so strong.
They are crazy fish. I caught one a few years ago, and I was bass fishing, and I saw this bowfin, clear as day, just sitting there in like 8 inches of water. I had a flipping jig on. I flipped it out right in front of it, twitched it once, and the fish just smacked it. And it just held it, and I just set the hook. I got him right beside the boat. It was the first one I'd ever caught, and I didn't have a net with me. You can't lip those things, I don't think, because they have teeth. So I was just like, how do I hold it? And in that confusion at the side of the boat, it was a decent size. It was like 7 pounds. I grabbed the side of like behind its head like a walleye, and then it kind of just like squirmed out of my hand, and then my jig fell out and didn't see him again. But I caught a few after that, but they weren't as big. But they fight like heck. Like, you have it on and you're just like, oh man, like you hook a 5-pound bowfin, it fights like a 10-pound bass. It is crazy. Not that I've caught a 10-pound bass, but they fight really good. And as for bowfin are cool. I've only caught them while ice fishing, but they hit like freight trains. Like, I was jigging for walleye
or
with
burbot, you mean?
Yeah, burbot. What did I say?
You said bowfin.
Oh, yeah, burbot. They fight crazy too, but I was jigging for walleye, and this thing just smacked my jig. And I was like, I thought it was a big pike because we were fishing on Nipissing, and the guy had showed us these pictures of this big northern this chick caught a few weeks before in the same hut. And I was like, oh, cool. And it gets up to the surface, and this big bowfin or a burbot. I'm messing them up. The slimy one. Yeah. And it was very, very cool fish, very cool markings, super slimy, gross. Apparently they taste good.
Eat one. I hear they're good.
I hear they're really good.
I want to catch one and I want to eat it.
I had no idea what to do with it at the time, so I released it. So he's probably still swimming up there. But yeah, very
one of the
cool
things
fish.
I've heard, and again, this is one thing I want to try if I get one, but you take like a cookie cutter and you stamp out small, like loony sized pieces out of the tail section of the bovine, or sorry, burbot. I say I'm doing it now. So you stamp out like little medallions out of the tail section of it, and you cook them. I think it's like in salted water. You boil it or something weird, but they come out like scallops. Apparently, it's like the closest. It's like poor man scallops, but apparently it's very good. So I want to try it.
Cool. I got a pretty interesting question here.
All right, now we're getting into the interesting ones. Nice.
No, but I oftentimes get a lot of random questions, but this is a very interesting question. This person asked, what non-professional fishing Instagram accounts are you guys big fans of? So what I did is I went back on our Instagram. If you don't follow us on Instagram, make sure you do. And I was kind of like looking through, our who we follow, because, we have a lot of followers, but we're fairly picky on who we follow. But I'm going to tell you some local Ontario accounts that I highly recommend you follow. We follow them. We really enjoy seeing their content they make. So I always say this, there's 2 different kinds of people on social media. There's people that view content, and there's people that make content that you view. So I have big respects for people that actually make content, because that's kind of what we do. We're not the best at it, but I'm going to give you some examples of people. So there's a guy, Southern Ontario Angling. This guy, he just actually bought a boat, which is I'm pretty jealous, but this guy goes out there. He makes tons of content. He does everything, fishing, how to tie knots, fishing tips, all that kind of stuff. He's pumping out content, and it's good. It's all like local. He catches bass, pike. Guy catches almost anything. Beast of a guy. Make sure you check him out. I'm going to link some of these guys down below. Another guy, Brad, Canadian Cowboy Outdoors. He's another guy that makes content. It's absolutely fantastic. Jeff Penner Fishing. He is Jeff's Jigs. He's a young guy. He's only 16 years old. He fishes and catches giant bass. He also ties really good jigs. River Run Fishing, Adam from River Run Fishing. The guy's a beast, has a podcast as well. Really good smallmouth angler. Fishes for a lot of different stuff. That's another guy. Time on the Lake. I don't know if you've seen that guy, Time on the Lake, Marcus. That guy is huge on TikTok. We follow each other, but I'm just like the little guy like, hi, how's it going? But he makes tons of good content. There's tons of people out there. I think of like Adam and Ben from Paddleheads. Those guys make content. They're out there fishing. They're going on camping trips all the time. Sometimes we tag along with them, but there are tons of people on Instagram that they actually make content. It's the content that we all watch, right? Everyone complains. They're like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. Why don't you do that? And we'll watch you do it. But those are just a few of some of the accounts that we personally follow. Again, there's tons of people, but you can't follow everyone, people. This is a good question because it actually involves something that Andrew did recently. What is your guess? What's your guess, Andrew?
Well, considering it's my life, I'd say it's fishing a tournament.
No, it's not that. Yeah, just kidding. Someone said they would like to hear about Andrew's tournament experience and whether you'd be open to do another one.
So, yeah, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that it would be my first tournament ever. It was coming up. So the date of recording this one, I just fished it earlier this week. And yeah, I loved it. My first tournament experience. It was the Bass Brawl for East Hill. And I was actually there with Brad, Canadian Cowboy Outdoors. And I was his co-angler for the evening. We were out on Shamong and Buckhorn was the area we were fishing. It was, I tell you, the first thing that really hit me was waiting there in the boat, waiting for the blast off time and not being able to cast. Because for two reasons. One, fishing time hadn't started. And two, where the blast off wasn't in the territory of the tournament that was taking place, like where the fishing allowed area was. So it was, and you'll get penalized if you're doing stuff like that, right? As you should. It's a tournament. It's organized. It's for that. But it was hard for me. I'm like, man, I looked at Brad. I'm like, I don't know if tournaments are for me, purely for the fact that it is killing me not casting at this dock we're sitting beside. Like, I need to throw my line in the water. But it was really cool. It's funny that the blast off where we left, it goes right up. We launched out of Gannon Narrows, and we had to go into Upper Buckhorn, which means there's that section under the bridge that is no wake. So all these boats are like, they fire up and immediately just like slow right down to 10K for the next like 15 minutes. And it was kind of like when you see cars in like downtown Toronto, like racing each other between the traffic lights. Like that's what it felt like. So it was pretty interesting that way. I mean, the excitement when something is on the line. Now, again, for me and Brad, we're there to have fun. It's not really anything on the line for us besides all the fish we caught. But the excitement of like, you want to do something with this opportunity, like with this event, you want to make sure you're getting a bass. So when we got that first bass, and I actually caught the first bass that went into the bag, it was exciting, like super exciting, more than just catching a regular bass, because it wasn't big. It was over that 12-inch limit that we had to get to make sure we get something on the board. So it was like that excitement of doing that, like every fish that you catch, like it just amps up your game of, I got to get this in the boat. I can't botch this net job. I got to make sure I do it right. And it wasn't anxiety for me, but it was like that excitement. Like there's more adrenaline going through you for this stuff. Yeah, I think we did all right. The results were actually posted today. So there were a total of 18 boats. We had to fish through the thunderstorm and stuff like that. It was an interesting evening. Brad and I placed 12th. So not bad. We had our bag of 5 fish was 8.8 pounds. We didn't hit the double digits like we were hoping. Now, I will say I was surprised to see the largest bag was 13.1 pounds. Now keep in mind, this is only 2.5 hours of fishing time that you actually have to catch this stuff. So the biggest bag was 13.1 pounds. I think that was the guy that had the like 5.5 pound largemouth. Like it was big. But when you're talking to all the other boats, pretty much everyone was saying the same thing of like, we're just catching clones of these like just legal size bass. It was a tough day. So we didn't get a big kicker in the boat. I think the biggest fish we had is about 2 pounds. The smallest one about 1.5 pounds. So I think we did all right. We got. I had a few things that I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to, 1, catch fish, and 2, actually contribute to what we handed in. I didn't want to be a waste of space in the boat. I also didn't want to botch a net job, which I didn't do. Neither of us did. We got all the fish in. I wanted to cull fish. I wanted to get to the point where we could start culling the fish in the live well. And we did. We got rid of some 1.1 pounders and put in 1.4 pounders. So it was exciting.
That was a tough day though. Like the weather was terrible that day.
But it was interesting because I wanted to see kind of where we ranked. There's a lot of 8 pounders, but the next person after us was already at 10 pounds, 10 ounces. So, or 10.1 pounds. So there was a bit over a pound difference between us and the next guy. But then, like I said, the biggest bag only being 13 pounds, we weren't like terribly far off from we're right in the heart of the competition. So I was, again, I didn't expect to place in the top half, which we didn't. That's fine. But we brought in 5 fish and we accomplished almost all of the goals that I was hoping to achieve out of it. And it was fun. We had a blast. So would I do it again? Absolutely. I would love to fish another tournament. It was exciting.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. I feel like half of these guys, they just get so into it. Like these guys, the pros with the big bass boats and stuff. And you'll see they'll come 4th out of 80 boats. And they're like, I don't know what happened. I was just off my game today. It's like, you just cut 4th. They have that mindset where if they're not number 1,
pros.
Yeah. If everything under number 1 is a loser. I don't know. It's just the mindset of different people when they get super competitive, right? But it's all about having fun.
Well, Brad and I were talking about that exact scenario. And then I was talking to Brad about how, like, Jesse and I, we were fishing recently and we had, it was kind of like an off day. It was hard fishing, really finicky fish, but we pulled in, we still got, like the back lake that we did really well on actually.
Yeah.
But the other day, the day before that, we went to a kind of a lake close to Kawarthas and we got, 5 bass each or so. We got a couple like nice ones. We got a 3 pounder, 3.5 pounder, whatever there. But a few 2s, nothing crazy. Like for that lake, it wasn't amazing for that lake that we fished before. Like we're fishing and we're just like, look at how far we have come, because there would have been a time 5-7 years ago only for us where we'd have had a day like that and be like, that was an awesome day. Like we both caught like 5 bass. We each caught a 3 pounder like that.
Yeah.
And that is an awesome day. So we got to keep it in perspective of like, just because you have more experience and you maybe have, your PBs are getting better as the years go by, you can't just hold yourself. It's only a good day if I'm breaking that PB or I'm doing better than I ever did. Like that's not going to happen all the time. Those days are few and far between. When they come, they're special. They're amazing. But you got to like be happy with your victories. So like these guys, like you say, these guys in the tournament, it's different a bit because they're trying to make money with it. But when they're upset about their, like, oh, I didn't do good, because like you did do good. You just didn't do as good as that guy, but you did really good.
Yeah.
It's all about perspective.
Yeah. And I always think like what Andrew said, like sometimes like we did this day where we went to a back lake and we caught at least 75 bass in the day between us. It was outrageous. It was crazy. And I had someone message me and be like, wow, like 70, 80 bass, like that's insane. The most I've ever caught in one day is like 5. And I'm like, most days it's like that for us, but every once in a while you have a killer day. We've been fishing for decades. We've honed our techniques down and we're fishing a back lake that was full of stupid fish. So like, I always think sometimes when we're fishing, even if we're having a slow day and we're catching a few here and there, I'm like, someone would kill to have a day like this. So don't get cocky and be like, oh, it was a terrible day. We only caught, 12 pounds of bass. Like it's fishing. It's fun. You're out there. You're enjoying it. It's therapy. Enjoy it. And like I said, someone would kill to do that. Maybe once a year you can take someone fishing that has less experience than you or doesn't have access to a boat and take them out fishing with you and provide that experience to them so that they can fuel their passion as well. So, and
they can remind you that fishing is fun again if you need it.
Yeah. And there's this thing called beginner's luck. So if you're trying to catch your PB muskie, bring an absolute beginner and you might catch him. All right.
And then as soon as he hooks into one, take his rod.
Yeah. Look over there, an osprey. All right. Here's a question from Southern Ontario Angling. Oh, that guy that we just talked about. He said, what water temp becomes unethical to target muskie? Now, this is actually interesting because I was just listening to the Muskie 360 podcast today at work, actually, and they were covering that exact thing. So I don't know if there's an exact number. Now, the number that we all throw around is 80 degrees.
85.
That's what everyone...
80?
80, yep. 80 degrees. That's usually when generally most guys will say...
I thought it was 85.
Yeah, that explains all the dead
I just
muskie.
go by whatever Jesse says.
But that 80 degree number, that's the number. Is that the exact number? So they were saying on the podcast, like, it's 80. Well, what if I was fishing and it's 81? Is 1 degree going to make a difference? Or what if it's 79? People catching them in 80? Like, there's no actual hard facts that I've seen, but 80 is the general number. I know that there's a bunch of guides that fish in the Kawarthas, and once the water heats up to high 70s, they're like, we're done. We're not musky fishing until the water cools down. So I've kind of done that myself, which unfortunately, where we fish, especially when I'm fishing my canoe, I don't have access to fishing big water. So sometimes if you're fishing in the shallow areas or like some back bays and stuff, the water temperature is a lot warmer than it is out in deeper water. So the water may be over 80 degrees where I normally fish, so I can't fish muskie, but then out in the middle of the lake, the water is 75. So I know a lot of people will be like, oh man, I can't believe those guys are muskie fishing. It's like, well, you don't know where they're fishing. And the water temperature at the top isn't the same as it is down where they're catching fish. So shouldn't be all judgy for people if they decide to go fishing. There's no rule that says you can't fish for muskie over 80 degrees. You shouldn't, probably. Is it, it can kill the fish. Like, we have seen many muskie over the years just dead floating on the surface. And maybe they weren't caught by muskie anglers themselves. Maybe they were caught by someone bass fishing and they had to play it for a long time because they were using, a BFS rod like Andrew. So we don't know, but generally 80 degrees. And unfortunately for me and my canoe, it kind of means that we fish for muskie in June, maybe the first week of July, but then pretty much the rest of the month of July is a no-go because the water's too hot. And generally I'd say we don't start fishing for muskie again till I'd say mid to late August. Now, again, like I said, are there areas that you could fish for them? Absolutely. But generally, once it's that hot time of the year, we go bass fishing because we have all fall to go muskie fishing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, generally when it's really hot and the water's soupy and it's 80, probably not the best idea to catch muskie. So,
and the reason why too, from what I've heard, is with that temperature, it's the oxygen amount in the water. So when they're exerting themselves, they're depleting their oxygen levels within their body, and then just with their exertion, and there's not enough oxygen in the water for them to raise those levels back up. So they will just die from essentially drowning, lack of oxygen. So it's just like us. Like if you had to climb Mount Everest with the thin air, that's exactly the water they're swimming in. When in those higher temperatures, it's very thin. There's not much actual oxygen in it. So they struggle with that. So anytime they have to exert themselves, whether it's being spooked multiple times or they're for some reason in this crazy mood to feed a whole bunch and they're just on the move a lot, that could trigger it too. But obviously they will be exerting themselves if they are on the end of the line fighting.
Yeah. And I know it's tempting because during the summer, fish's metabolism is super high. And a lot of muskie go deep in the summer, like 15, 20 feet, just because, it's hot. But a lot of them are stuck in the weeds in the shallows because there is a lot of oxygen because of the plants. And those fish can oftentimes, because their metabolism is so high, because, they're cold-blooded creatures, they're feeding like crazy and they're aggressive. So it's very tempting to fish for them even when it's super hot. But a lot of you guys are serious anglers and you would obviously want to keep ethics and, proper fish handling and techniques in mind. So that may be something that you personally decide not to do during the summer. But again, we're not the cops. We're not going to enforce any of that. So we're going to handle one more question. And this is a good one because I don't know if I've told you guys this, but our top 2 most downloaded podcasts are about what species, Andrew? It's on your shirt. Yeah, pike. For some reason, every time we post a pike podcast, it gets the most downloads every single time. It just blows my mind. I know this is Ontario and there's tons of pike fishing.
No one talks about them.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about them briefly right now. This question is, what are some of your favorite ways to catch pike, lures, and methods? So you take one and I'll take one.
I love midsummer topwater pike fishing. I love it. And I'll do 2 different things with that is fishing a regular spook. They will come after that thing like 7-10 times before they actually get it. Because as they get closer, they just go blind and they have their mouth open and the lure goes flying 3 feet away. And there they are 3 feet in the air doing a slow cartwheel. Like it's fun to see. But I find with topwater like the Hellraiser or something that is a lot of back weighted. So if you have like a walking bait and you're walking it slow and you pause and a back end sags down, once it becomes more vertical in the water, the hookup ratio gets a lot higher. So if you are going to go topwater fishing and you want a good hookup ratio and not just, a fun show, which again, that has its place. When I don't care about what I catch or not, it is fun to just see him skyrocket multiple times. But yeah, if you fish something like that sits a bit more vertical, it's butt down in the water, that can be a big deal for that hookup ratio for those pike.
Yeah, I actually caught a really cool pike a few years ago on a spook, and I was fishing for smallmouth. It was early morning, super calm. Chucked my spook out. It was a super spook junior, like the little 2-hook one. Whipped it out, and this fish exploded and cartwheeled on it. And it must have came up and like T-boned the thing and then cartwheeled. And then when it landed, it was already hooked. Like sometimes that happens and you set the hook and the lure just flies out of their mouth or they miss it completely. And put up a heck of a fight. And I was like, holy smokes. I thought it was a muskie because it was like, muskie do that all the time, right? It was a big pike. I actually got him. First time he grabbed it, he got it. Other times, like Andrew said, they'll go for it like 3 or 4 times and miss it every single time. It's like, dude, your eyes are on top of your head. Come on. You should be looking.
I had one at the cottage. I kid you not, went for it 12 times in a row on the same cast. Just kept going, and it eventually nailed it on that 12th time. It was like 8 feet away from the boat. It finally got it, and it was a 22-inch pike.
Giant. I'd have to say one of my favorite ways to catch pike is with a jerkbait, and oftentimes that's kind of an early season thing for us, especially because jerkbaits can be worked very slowly, which is great. And they also draw fish in from a long distance. Pike are very visual feeders, like we always mention. So any lure like, a spinner, a spoon, a spinnerbait, a chatterbait, something that has some flash and it's bright colored, it's going to be good. But one of our favorite baits, it's hard to beat, is just an X-Trap, Andrew's favorite. We have a whole bunch of jerkbaits that we use, and they all catch fish. The Dual Realis jerkbaits are my current favorite. Just like Fire Tiger, Bright Orange, Silver, doesn't matter really. Just cast it out. And what I like to do is sometimes when the pike are aggressive, I won't even fish it like a jerkbait. I'll just cast it and reel it in. Pike don't care. Just swims back as a good wobble to it, like a husky jerk. Or we'll just troll them behind the boat. Sometimes before we got like motors, we were fishing out of Andrew's canoe. We would just cast like a Rapala husky jerk behind the boat, like the canoe, 50 feet behind, and then just paddle along. That thing would be wiggling back there, and a pike would just come up and smack it. Pike will follow your lure sometimes for a long time and then just engulf it. And I think if I had to have only one pike lure, it would probably be a jerkbait. It would be a hard choice for you, but it would probably be a jerkbait. So they're great lures. You can get shallow diving ones, deep diving ones, cover the whole water spectrum right there. The only bad thing about jerkbaits is pike tend to engulf them, and they have oftentimes 3 sets of treble hooks, which is bad. So make sure you have jaw spreaders and a good pair of pliers.
We want to, before we leave, we want to give a big thanks to all of our people who, one, are listening. You guys, thanks for listening yet again to another hopefully awesome podcast. I think I enjoyed it. I know Jesse does. Yeah, we always enjoy these Q&As. Big thanks especially to our Patreon members, because you guys are help out a lot to help it not come out of just Jesse and my pocket all the time for the the editing and the time and stuff it takes into, which is what Jesse looks after, all of it. So thanks to Jesse, but thanks to everyone who's supporting us on Patreon and stuff like that to make it available that we can continue to do so, make this podcast. So thank you so much. If you would like to help support the podcast by becoming a member, you also are automatically entered into all the giveaways when you become a Patreon member of $2 or more. So it's not much like buying us a cup of coffee once a month and only buying one of us a cup of coffee, which is kind of rude. So maybe go for that $4 a month. No. But we're excited to have giveaways, and all those giveaways are going right to our automatically entered for our Patreon members so they can win. Now, before we sign off, we have, as tradition states, we have the quote of the week, and to handle that is Jesse.
I forgot about that.
That's the quote of the week. All right, that's I forgot about that.